Awesome. All right. So today I am here with Alyson Moo Young, who is a certified baby wearing educator, correct? And that's what we're going to talk about today, about wearing your baby, or a lot of people know it as baby wearing. And I know I wore my babies, so I know how important it is and how beneficial it was for me, but I didn't do it from a place of knowledge. I kind of did it because my friends in Israel did it, my sister did it, and then I'm like, oh, this looks amazing. I'm going to do it. So I would love for you today to give our audience the information of why the hell should they baby wear. Like, I know it's an expense, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many carriers, and we have strollers, right? And we also have arms, correct?
Yep.
So I think most people today are interested in knowing the why, like what's the benefit. So I'm gonna just let you talk.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I love the opportunity. Yes, I am a certified baby wearing educator, and I obviously may be a little bit biased to telling people that they should baby wear, but I too did it with all three of my kids, right? So I did it 14 years ago with my oldest, but like you, I didn't really do it because I saw other people doing it. I did it just as a necessity. You know, I was going to a big city and I didn't want to carry a stroller or a big carrier around. So I just wore my baby back then in like a little Bjorn carrier in the front, or like in a little sling pouch. You know, I wore her on the side, and I just did it because she was comfortable in there. She didn't really cry. People couldn't touch her. So that's kind of how I started doing it, like you. And then fast forward, when I had my second child, 8 years after that, again, kind of just out of necessity, right? So you have two kids you're juggling. So what's a better way than to follow the oldest around and do what you had to do, but also care for your newborn? So if we want to just talk about benefits, I mean, think about it. When you have a newborn, you know, this little tiny baby, they come out and then you put them down, and what's the first thing most babies do?
Cry.
They cry, and they just cry and cry and cry. And so for my second, did that a lot. I kept thinking like something must be wrong with her. She just always cries. But then when I picked her up, she stopped crying. So again, here comes this idea of, well, let me just find something that I can hold my baby close to me in. And that's how I got into baby wearing again, 8.5 years later after that.
Right.
So,
I actually remember myself, sorry to interrupt you, but I remember thinking, oh my God, I can vacuum and I can do the dishes while, holding my baby.
yeah, no, at that time, I was toying with the idea of working from home, but I had a newborn. So the newborn was always crying. I couldn't sit at a computer all the time. So I literally put her in a sling in the front, and I don't want to say magically stopped crying, but she did. And so for newborns and babies, when they're first born, they're kind of going through what we call the fourth trimester, which is that first 3 months outside the womb when they're getting accustomed to the world. And it's tough for them, right? Because they've had everything done for them while in the womb. They've been fed, they've been cared for, they're the perfect temperature. You know, they don't have to, everything, there's emotion, the swaying, everything is done by mom. So here they are now in the new world, and they're trying to get adjusted. So baby wearing is just kind of one of those things that kind of helps baby and helps mom at the same time to kind of soothe that baby, right? So when you wear your baby close to you, and whatever carrier it might be, they can smell mom, they can feel mom. Mom's also helping to regulate their temperature by having skin to skin contact, which is highly encouraged in hospitals nowadays, especially with preemies. They're always, it also helps with breastfeeding too, right? So you can respond to your baby the moment you know that your baby's hungry and you want to feed on demand. That baby's going to let you know, and the baby's close to you, and you can feed them, whether that's in the carrier or you take them out and you nurse them. So that's all benefits when it comes to babies. For mom also, because the baby stops crying, well, mom's in a better mood now. The baby's not always crying. And then most of all, your hands are free, right? So you don't have to carry the baby. You don't have to hold them. You don't have to push a stroller. You don't have to carry a large carrier infant seat. The baby's just on you. Simple. It almost sounds like, why shouldn't you do it?
You're right. I mean, I guess why you shouldn't is because you're scared that they might fall. You're scared that you're not doing it right. I've heard moms saying, "Oh my God, I don't want to choke my baby. I want to make sure that," I've heard a lot of things, but I mean, I obviously didn't feel like I shouldn't. I felt like I definitely should. And my only problem, to be completely honest, was at some point it started hurting my back. So
Mhm.
maybe that leads to the next question. Unless you have more benefits, I know for sure that my carrier, the one I used back then, was not the right fabric. Once my baby became like 15, 16 pounds, then I felt like, oh my
Mm.
God, this is not right anymore, which then I started asking around, and I went and I bought a more structured type of carrier that went around my waist, and that helped a lot actually because it was made of like a denim actually at that point. I think it was an ergo, but it was made of denim, and I was able to fasten it to make it fit better. So
Yeah,
is
no,
there
that's
different carriers for different stages?
yep, yep. And that's a really great question because I get that question a lot. So you have obviously moms who have very tiny newborns, and then you have moms that are dealing with babies maybe through toddlerhood, and they're wondering if baby wearing is still the right time for them. And the short answer is yes. You can wear your little one from newborn all the way up through preschool age. They even have preschool size carriers now. So as long as your child is asking you to hold them in your arms, there's no reason why you can't wear them. It just looks a little different. So for a
Right.
newborn, obviously, they're used to being in the womb, compact, small. Their spine is in that C shape. So that's what you want to be able to do the same way you would hold a baby, and you hold a baby on your chest like a newborn. You want to have a carrier that's going to support that newborn while they're that size. And then as your baby grows and gets older, like you mentioned, when they start putting on weight, they start getting bigger, they start to be able to sit up a bit more. They're no longer in that froggy style C shape anymore. Now you can go into carriers that allow for something that's a little bit more structured. So when we say structured carriers, we're talking about the ones with the buckles and the shoulder straps versus something maybe like a wrap or a soft carrier that you can wrap around you, a wrap, a ring sling. All of those can be used from newborn through toddlerhood, but sometimes they do work best when you have a smaller child or a child that weighs a little bit less.
Right. So before I ask you about how to even choose one, I mean,
Mhm.
that gives us a little bit of a clue. Is there a wrong way? Like, could you hurt your baby wearing your baby? Is there a bad way of wearing baby?
Yeah, so you know what? Again, so back then when you were probably wearing your kids and when I was wearing my kids, they had carriers that obviously are no longer around now because as time went on and we get a little bit of knowledge, we knew that carriers that cover the face completely are now no longer safe. And carriers that put the baby in a position where their chin is on their chest and they're too much in a fetal position isn't safe as well. So now we've come to the point where now there's carriers where typically, there's going to be a manual with it if you purchase it brand new, or if you can go online, you can probably look up that manual as well. But there's a couple of baby wearing safety checks and safety tips that you can do for every baby, no matter what the carrier is. So one, like I mentioned before, when you put your baby in, you want to make sure that they're secure and they're snug against you. They aren't loose. And that goes for a newborn. You don't want to have too much swaying around. The baby shouldn't be able to sway around. The other thing is to make sure that there's always air going over the baby's face. So you shouldn't have fabric covering the baby's face. You can have it where their head is tucked in against your chest, but it shouldn't be covering the face. The other important tip is that the baby is worn, if you're going to wear the baby on the front, because you can also wear the baby on the back or on the hip, you also want to make sure that they're high enough on your chest that you can kiss the top of their head without pushing them up. And that just allows mom to remember, oh, I have a baby here. I need to be able to make sure that they're breathing, that their chin is not resting on their chest, and that there's always air going over their face.
Right. And what about when the legs are like dangling like that? I know that you mentioned the froggy
Yep.
where the newborn needs to have their knees kind of like bent and into themselves. What about when you see moms with very little babies? I think it's not right, but I don't know for sure. But when the legs are like dangling, and I'm like, well, where's that motion where the
Yep.
baby's knees are gonna be folded a little bit?
Another really great question, and a question that I get a lot because there's been a little bit of debate, especially in the baby wearing community and amongst moms, whether or not having those legs tucked in or out or if the leg should be in the M shape, the froggy position, or if they can dangle. So here's the thing, really, you want your carrier to mimic the way a baby feels. So if you have a newborn and you're holding them on their chest and they naturally bring their legs up and under them, there's no problem with tucking their legs in as long as they're seated in the carrier and all of their weight is on their bum. So if they have their legs up and under them, they shouldn't be resting on their feet. They should be resting on their bum. And then if they have their legs out, because some newborns realize really quickly they're no longer in the womb, they want to stretch out, they want to have their legs out, they maybe sometimes want to have their legs around the sides of their body and dangling just a bit, you want to be able to have a carrier that supports that as well. And so in that case, it is ideal to have a baby in a carrier where they're in the M-shaped position, and that just means their knees are at or slightly above their bum. And that allows for a better hip placement for them. However, if you do have a carrier that doesn't allow for that, there are some carriers out there that have the legs hanging low where the knees are are placed below the bum. It's not an unsafe thing. We do know now with research that it shows us that it only, there's something called hip dysplasia out there. And we know that when you wear a carrier that doesn't allow from the M position, it doesn't cause hip dysplasia. The only thing that it does do is that if the baby's already prone to it, if they've had it run in their family, then it could exacerbate the problem and make it worse, but it won't cause it. So ideally, do we want to pick a carrier that, you know, supports that baby in the M position? Absolutely. But if you have a carrier already that does not do that, there's no harm in using it. Once the baby gets to about 6 months of age and can sit up, the idea of having those hips lower, it doesn't pose a problem anyways, because hip dysplasia is only a problem just before they get to be 6 months.
Okay, got it. Okay, so then the next question is, like, I know you're an educator, so obviously you help people pick the right carrier for them. What do you do? Do you go with a bunch of carriers? How do they know how to choose a carrier?
Yeah, I do. So that's one of the options of having a private consultation, is that there are so many carriers out there. There's not only different kinds of carriers, right? So there's ring slings. We talked a little bit about soft structured carriers with the buckles. There's wraps, there's soft wraps, there's stretchy wraps. There's on Buhimos, there's all kinds of different carriers, but within those different categories, now there's a bunch of different brands that make those different ones. So I can definitely see how it's overwhelming to a mom to pick one. So prior to, you know, obviously COVID happening, and then even before that, we had a lot of stores that are closing their doors. So moms aren't able to go into those stores, try on all these different kinds of options, because there aren't that many options in the store. So typically what I could do is come to a home or to an event and carry one kind of every carrier there, so moms can try them on and say, hey, you know what, this one works for me. You know what, this ring sling, I tried it on and it's only, you know, has the weight on one shoulder. Maybe it's not for me.
Right. Got it. Okay. So we're obviously going to share your information, but how many how many baby wearing educator are out there? So you're in South Florida, which obviously it'll be easy to find you, but how many are there? How easy is it to find the help?
Yeah, so there are the organization that I got certified with, I knew they were a pretty big organization, and they have a website that you can go to that you can look up Babywearing Educators. However, now I know that there's several different organizations that are certifying Babywearing Educators. So I'm sure if you do some type of Google search, it'll probably have the organizations on there where you can do a specific search, at least for your area or for the county,
Right.
and see how many Babywearing Educators there are.
Right, because I feel like, you know, COVID and everything, but it's still something that I feel like if I need to feel, it's a little harder to do online, in my opinion. Obviously, at the time, I remember using YouTube and trying different ties and
Still
styles.
a good option right now. Yeah.
Right, but I feel like if you want to actually try carriers, it needs to be in person, right? I mean, you can't really try it on when you're doing the YouTube. You can learn different techniques on YouTube, but it's hard to actually try before. And then if they don't have a baby,
a baby carrier to show?
No, I'm saying if they don't actually have a baby.
Oh, right. And that's kind of the hard part. And so with and the thing is too, even if there is a store nearby, you can go into Target or a Bye Bye Baby, they're going to have limited carriers there, right? So a lot of people know the big brands like Doula and Ergo and maybe Moby and Babywearing. Those will probably be the 4 that you see. But believe me, there's a plethora of other brands and carriers out there that are being made that are fabulous outside of those.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So, I mean, I think this is good amount of information. And I have to say, seriously, I loved it. And I didn't know anything about it. And all I had was the big, long wrap, you know, that worked for me for about, you know, 5 or 6 months. And then when I got the structured one, honestly, I wasn't a huge fan. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it wasn't the right one for me. I didn't have the knowledge that I have today. And I didn't have you around back then. I only met you once my kids were a lot older, and I was definitely not carrying them anymore. But we will share your information. And if anyone wants to reach out and get a consultation, of course, I know you travel in the South Florida area. And if not, maybe you can recommend some organization where they can look up locally. And I really want to thank you for joining me today. I feel like this is super important information. And yes, I also believe that it helps with breastfeeding because it helped me, and it really helped me do anything and everything around the house. Like I was like, how am I going to do this? And that's really how I did everything. I was just wearing my baby, and I did, you know, everything that I needed to do. And yes, my baby were criers. I could not put them down, not even for 1 second.
And I think the more kids you have is the more you are a fan of baby wearing, right? So when you have one, you're like, maybe I should try it. You know, maybe this is a cool idea. But when you have 2 and 3 and more than that, you're like, oh, I definitely need something to be able to run after all these other kids.
I know, and going to the grocery store or doing anything out with more than 1 child. Yeah.
Double strollers, sure. You know, I'm not a fan of.
Me neither. Awesome. So I really want to thank you.
Yes, I appreciate it.
No, this is fun. I love it. And we're gonna meet again soon and maybe talk a little bit about other things, because I know you do a lot in this area.